At dawn, the silence of Larry McConnell's Las Vegas home shattered with a sound like splitting steel. The floor in his bathroom buckled, tiles cracked open, and foul sewage bubbled up through jagged seams. A wave of rot stung his nose as water seeped into the hallway carpet. Larry, a Vietnam veteran used to order and discipline, stood frozen at the doorframe, watching his home drown in filth. He knew exactly what caused it. The massive HOA-maintained oak outside, its diseased roots punching straight into his sewer line. He'd begged them to remove it last year, warned them at the meeting that it was dying. They'd smirked, dismissing him. His voice broke into a whisper now, fists trembling as sewage climbed higher into his walls. They knew, they ignored it, and now it's me who pays. The next morning, Larry moved with military precision, phone in hand, dialing every HOA contact he could find. 6 voicemails, 2 emails flagged urgent. Each message repeated the same plea. The collapse was caused by their tree, not me. By noon, still no reply, only the choking smell of sewage spreading through his home. He remembered last spring's board meeting. His voice had risen in warning. That tree is rotting, it's a hazard. And Sophia Blackstone, the HOA president, had leaned back in her chair, smiling like a queen in judgment. Mr. McConnell, our trees are healthy. Perhaps your memory isn't. Now his bathroom was unlivable, black mold creeping into drywall. He sank onto his couch, metals glinting above him, whispering bitterly, I fought for them, and this is how they fight for me?
By the 3rd day, the damage grew worse. Sewage seeped under doors, warping floors, making the air thick with mildew. Larry tried scrubbing, tried sealing cracks, but nothing slowed the poison. His phone rang. Finally, a response. The HOA's property manager spoke coldly. Inspection is scheduled in 30 business days. 30 days? Larry's grip tightened on the receiver until his knuckles blanched. He nearly laughed at the absurdity. His bathroom had already collapsed. He walked outside, staring at the oak's hollow trunk, bark splitting where rot gnawed. He pressed a hand against the tree, his voice low, venomous. You killed my home, and they let you. A neighbor passed, eyes full of pity, but said nothing. Larry felt humiliation harden into rage. This wasn't neglect, it was war. On the 4th morning, a certified envelope awaited him at the mailbox. Heavy, official. Inside, a printed invoice, assessment for property damage and sewer repair, $8,142, due within 30 days. His heart slammed against his ribs. They weren't fixing it, they were blaming him. He staggered into his kitchen, the paper shaking in his calloused hand. $8,000? His voice cracked. He slammed the letter onto the counter so hard the dishes rattled. His late wife's photo stared down at him from the wall, her gentle eyes reminding him of the home they built together. Now that home was sinking, and the people sworn to protect it had turned into predators. Larry's jaw set, teeth grinding. They break it, I pay for it? Not this time. The letter curled at the edges under his fist, but his resolve was sharp as steel. By Saturday, Larry stood in his yard, boots planted in the dirt, staring at the rotting oak like it was a battlefield opponent. The bark was split wide, showing disease that should have condemned it years ago. His neighbor, Betty Harris, walked up, worry etched on her face. Larry, what'll you do now? She asked softly. He lifted the invoice with shaking hands, bold numbers glaring like an insult. Sunlight caught the sweat on his forehead as his voice dropped, low but burning. I'm not paying for their neglect. They did this, and I'll make them answer for every damn dollar. The wind carried the stench from his ruined bathroom across the yard, acrid and humiliating. Larry's fists clenched, his veteran's resolve snapping into place. This fight wasn't about sewage anymore. It was about dignity, justice, and survival. On Monday morning, Larry marched into the HOA office like a soldier returning to battle. The smell of antiseptic and polished wood clashed with the stink of sewage still on his clothes. Behind the counter sat Sophia Blackstone, immaculately dressed in a cream blazer, her nails clicking against the desk as if marking time. Larry slammed the invoice down. "You will not pin your rotten tree on me." His voice cracked across the sterile room. Sophia's eyes flicked to the paper, then back to him, calm as ice. "Mr. McConnell, homeowners are responsible for repairs within their property lines. If you can't manage that, perhaps this community isn't right for you." The words cut deeper than the debt. Larry's jaw flexed as he leaned closer, whispering like a threat. "I buried friends for this country. I won't bury my home for your lies." That night, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Larry stood alone at the podium, papers in hand, while 5 board members formed a wall of indifference across the stage. Sophia raised her voice for the room. "Mr. McConnell allowed his plumbing to fail. The HOA is not at fault." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Larry held up photos, roots splitting sewer pipes, bark hollow with rot. He shouted, his voice shaking, "That tree was your responsibility. I warned you last year, on record." Sophia's smile widened. Delusions don't change facts. The room shifted uneasily, neighbors torn between sympathy and fear of HOA retaliation. Larry's eyes scanned them, searching for courage in familiar faces, but found only silence. The weight of abandonment pressed on him like sandbags. They were shielding themselves with bureaucracy, leaving him to drown. When the meeting adjourned, Larry trudged outside under flickering parking lot lights. That's when Betty Harris, his longtime neighbor, hurried to his side. "Larry," she whispered, eyes darting, "I heard Sophia admit the tree was dying. She said it was too expensive to remove, better to let nature handle it." Larry froze, blood hammering in his ears. Proof. At last, proof. Betty's voice cracked. "I'll testify if it comes to it. They can't keep doing this." In the darkness, Larry gripped her trembling hand. "You're braver than all of them combined." A car door slammed in the distance. Sophia, slipping into a black SUV, her laughter carrying on the night air. The sound stung like acid. Larry's fury hardened into resolve. If they wouldn't admit fault, he would force them.
The next morning, Larry visited his attorney, Jane Mitchell, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for tearing apart corrupt boards. Her office smelled of paper and iron resolve. She scanned the photos, the invoice, Betty's statement, her lips tightening. They shifted liability knowing the tree was their responsibility. That's fraud. Larry leaned forward, voice low. "I don't want settlement. I want them exposed." Jane nodded slowly. "Then we hit them where it hurts. An injunction, public records, and discovery of financial mismanagement. People like Sophia always leave a trail." Larry felt something stir inside him he hadn't felt since his service days. Momentum. The battle was moving from sewage-soaked walls to the courtroom, where truth could slice through their lies like a bayonet. By week's end, Larry's case was filed, but the HOA wasn't retreating. Instead, a second certified letter landed in his mailbox. Non-compliance with community maintenance standards, $2,500 additional fine. His hands shook as he tore it open. The audacity was staggering. "They're doubling down," he muttered, pacing the kitchen. That evening, another confrontation erupted when Sophia appeared on his lawn, clipboard in hand. "Every day you stall, your debt grows," she sneered. Larry's voice thundered back, neighbors peeking from behind curtains. "You'll regret this, Sophia. The court will drag your lies into the light." Her smirk faltered for just a second, then hardened again. But that tiny crack was enough. Larry had found her weakness, fear of exposure, and he planned to use it.
The courthouse smelled of dust and fear the morning Jane filed for discovery. Boxes of HOA records were wheeled in, contracts, budgets, maintenance logs. Larry sat stiff, eyes scanning the mountain of paper. Jane's voice carried like steel. "We'll find the rot in their foundation." Across the aisle, Sophia whispered furiously to her lawyer, her mask of calm beginning to slip. During the first review, Jane struck gold, a maintenance request Larry had filed last year, documenting the dying tree, signed and ignored by Sophia. In open court, Jane slammed it onto the table. Larry leaned forward, his voice steady but sharp. "You had the chance to fix this. You chose not to." Sophia flinched as murmurs filled the room. For the first time, the HOA board's fortress cracked. News spread quickly through the neighborhood. At a hastily arranged HOA gathering, lines were drawn like battle trenches. Some residents muttered that Larry was storing chaos. Others, emboldened, whispered of fines, threats, and sudden violations that never made sense. "She fined me for leaving my Christmas lights up 3 days past December," Betty admitted aloud. Heads turned. A young father stood, trembling. "I paid $1,200 for painting my fence the same color it was before." Sophia's voice thundered across the hall. "These are lies, fabrications meant to slander your board." Larry rose, gripping the podium, his eyes burning. "Then why are so many stories the same?" The silence that followed was more damning than any outburst. Fear was dissolving into anger, and the board could feel it.
The courtroom swelled with tension as Sophia took the stand. Her suit was pristine, her smile rehearsed. Jane's cross-examination was relentless. "Mrs. Blackstone, why was Mr. McConnell's documented request ignored?" Sophia shifted, her voice icy. "It wasn't ignored. It was misfiled." Jane pounced. "Yet your signature's right here acknowledging the hazard." The jury leaned forward. Larry clenched his fists under the table. Sophia snapped suddenly, venom lacing her words. "This is an old man trying to cover his incompetence." Jane's eyes narrowed. "The only incompetence here is an HOA president who ignored her duty." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Sophia's facade cracked, revealing the arrogance beneath. For the first time, the judge's gavel struck, not at Larry, but at her. That night, Larry returned to find his property vandalized. Eggs splattered across siding, crude words sprayed in red paint. Liar, troublemaker. His chest tightened, rage boiling beneath the exhaustion. Betty rushed over, tears in her eyes. "Larry, they'll destroy you if you keep pushing." He gripped the bat he now kept by the door, his voice low. "They already tried, and they failed." Sophia's SUV crawled past the curb, headlights lingering too long, her silhouette unmistakable behind the wheel. Their eyes locked across the night air, a silent war cry. Larry shouted into the darkness, voice echoing, "You're not above the law, Sophia. Not anymore." Curtains twitched, neighbors watching, the neighborhood itself becoming an audience to their bitter duel. 2 weeks later, Jane stormed into Larry's kitchen with a manila folder that might as well have been dynamite. Inside were bank statements, $28,000 siphoned from HOA maintenance funds into an account under Sophia's name. Larry's breath caught. Jane whispered, "She's been embezzling, using violations to cover the missing money." Court filings were updated immediately. The next hearing, Jane unveiled the documents like a magician revealing her final trick. Sophia's lawyer fumbled, the judge's eyebrows arced. Larry leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of every sleepless night. "You didn't just poison my home, you poisoned this whole community." Sophia's face drained of color as whispers thundered through the room. The boardroom tyrant was suddenly just another fraud, exposed under the unforgiving light of truth. When the embezzlement files went public, the HOA board fractured overnight. Nathan, the treasurer, resigned mid-meeting, his hands trembling. "I didn't know she was stealing. God help me, I didn't know," he muttered, pushing his badge across the table. Other members sat silent, faces pale as the weight of betrayal pressed down. The courtroom gallery erupted when Jane announced, "The HOA owes Mr. McConnell restitution for damages, harassment, and fraudulent fines." Sophia's voice cracked, desperate. "You can't ruin me like this." Larry stood slowly, eyes fixed on her. "You did that yourself." The gavel struck like thunder, sealing her downfall. Years of intimidation had collapsed in one day, leaving Sophia hollow-eyed as bailiffs escorted her out. For the first time, Larry felt the neighborhood breathe again. The next neighborhood meeting was unlike any Larry had seen. Dozens of residents crowded the room, not in fear, but in solidarity.
Betty stood at his side, clutching his arm proudly. One by one, neighbors admitted their fines, their silenced frustrations, their fear of Sophia's wrath. Larry listened, nodding, until a young mother whispered, "You gave us the courage to fight back." Sophia's empty chair loomed like a ghost at the table, a symbol of everything they'd endured. When the vote came, the crowd's roar echoed through the hall. The entire board was dissolved. For the first time in years, homeowners weren't divided. They were united, rebuilding trust with one another. Larry raised his voice. "This is our community, not hers. Never again." The applause thundered, shaking the walls. But Sophia wasn't done yet. At the final hearing, she appeared with disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, clutching papers like life rafts. "It was a clerical error," she cried, voice breaking. "I only wanted what's best for this neighborhood." The judge's stare was ice. Jane stepped forward, placing one final exhibit on the desk. Sophia's signature authorizing false citations matched against her bank withdrawals. The courtroom gasped. Sophia's knees buckled as bailiffs steadied her. Larry's voice cut through the chaos, steady and unflinching. "You terrorized me, you poisoned this community, and now you'll answer for it." Sophia's head bowed, tears streaking down her once proud face. She wasn't the queen bee anymore. She was a fraud, stripped of her crown, begging a system she had once manipulated.
The ruling came swift and devastating. Sophia was ordered to repay $150,000 in restitution, barred from holding any leadership role for life, and sentenced to probation under financial supervision. Her mansion was placed under lien to cover damages. Larry stood outside the courthouse as cameras flashed, but his words were simple. It was never about money. It was about dignity. Behind him, Sophia was ushered into a waiting car, her shoulders slumped, her arrogance drained. Neighbors gathered around Larry, shaking his hand, thanking him. Even those who had once sided with Sophia now lowered their heads in shame. For Sophia, regret was no longer a choice. It was her only companion. For Larry, justice had become more than a verdict. It was a legacy. Months later, the neighborhood looked different, not because of new fences or gardens, but because of freedom. Children played without parents fearing sudden fines. Betty's laughter echoed down the block as she hosted a barbecue on her porch, something Sophia would have once punished. Larry sat quietly in his rocking chair, watching a sunset that finally felt like peace. A young neighbor stopped by, smiling. "Mr. McConnell, you didn't just win your case, you gave us back our community." He nodded, emotion thick in his throat. For years, he'd carried the weight of silence, of being branded a troublemaker. Now the silence was gone, replaced by voices united against tyranny. The HOA's reign had ended, and the people had reclaimed their power. Larry closed his eyes, knowing his fight had been worth every scar.